Good morning. Welcome to our first video chat in Management 102. As we talked about in our first week of class, the goal of these video chats is to help me focus you into the material that I want you to master for our series of tests. You have a slide deck that's available to you, and you have your textbook, but these are the specific concepts and theories that I want you to be able to master so you're going to do well on the test. There's also a couple of video chats that are focused primarily to Crimson, and that's some tips that'll help you perform on the deliverables that we're going to be working with. So let's go ahead and get started. In this chat, we're going to talk about organizational models and how they impact communication. We're going to talk about formal and informal communication within the organization. We're going to talk about the ways that organizations coordinate people and the way that organizations are designed to affect communication. In your Management 102, if you haven't taken it or you're taking it now, you're going to be exposed to a series of management models. And I'm going to go through those very quickly because in your Management 102 you dig deeper into them. I just want to give you a quick refresher, and then we'll talk a bit about how they impact the way that people communicate using these management styles. The first approach is very, very traditional. In those cases, organizations are designed very rigid, very bureaucratic. We tend to call those bureaucratic organizational models. Again, the theorists that helped you think about those are Frederick Taylor, sort of the father of modern scientific management, Henry Fayol from France, an engineer who again brought in the basic concepts of management that he felt could be taught to anyone running an organization, and Max Weber, who was the father of bureaucracy. So if you're working for an agency that's too bureaucratic, blame Max Weber, it was his fault. The second group of theories was the human relations model, and those were pioneered by Elton Mayo when he did the Hawthorne studies, taking a look at the effect of lighting on individuals working in a factory. And what he found was it wasn't a function of light, it was a function of management paying attention. This led to a whole lot of thinking around the need to pay attention to how we treat individuals as human beings within the organization. And they drew some conclusions that in more relaxed, congenial work groups and where supervisors were supportive, productivity tended to go up. And he also found that humans were very, very social, and their relationship with their peers had an impact on their ability to perform. The systems theory now started to integrate the whole organization. And we're now seeing a great deal of effort in the organizations you're going to be going into where companies are trying to tear down silos and to operate more cross-functionally. And you're going to hear that theme as we go through our discussions during the semester. In a systems approach, you see that there's all kinds of communication styles that are taking place. And there's an awareness that people in key positions can impact an entire large organization. So we have to figure out ways that we can communicate so information is flowing far more freely, and that we need to build organizational cultures that tend to drive the organization. As you're going to be taught in your management classes, cultures are so powerful that they can override even the best strategies and the best thinking of management. That led to a development of what we call contingency theories, and those theories tend to say, you know, things are so complicated, we can't use just one model. In the course of a day, management may have to set up work groups or functions in a way that are very, very different. So during the day, we take a look at designing structures where the relationship with you as a leader or manager may be weak or may be strong. You communicate differently. That you're seen as a person of power or you're seen as a person that is weaker. Again, you communicate very differently. And then we take a look at how the tasks are organized in the organization. And again, where tasks are routine, people have already mastered it, we can be more laissez-faire in our communication. Where people are unskilled and the task is very complicated, we may need to be more engaged. And it even gets down to whether or not the manager is liked or disliked. And sometimes you may have to communicate with a more authoritative way if you're not being responded to positively by the workforce. Now, what's exciting now, and what you're going to see in a number of the organizations you're working with, is a transformational model. And here we're seeing organizations being set up virtually. Global organizations tend to do a great deal of management from remote locations. Even companies that are local because of commuting issues, people working from home, they're setting up more virtual situations. And the small internal multi-unit organizations are starting to be set up. And what we're finding is things are getting so complicated that organizations really are forming teams to take on specific issues, and those teams are even managing other teams. So the structure of the organization looks very, very much like a spider web with all these spokes and nodes taking place, and communication in those settings have to be handled very, very effectively, or the teams can spin out of control. Again, it's something new that we're seeing, and you're seeing it all the way from government to private industry. And General McChrystal wrote a very, very interesting book called The Team of Teams, where that approach was taken in redesigning the special ops community so that they could deal with the challenges they faced in a far more effective way. In the organization, you see that communication starts to flow in several directions. The traditional is the all-knowing, all-seeing, obedientious Hutka boss who communicates down into the organization. That's handled through memos, through small town hall meetings, and even videos like you're watching right now, where a CEO or a senior exec will use those tools to communicate down into the organization. Organizations are struggling now to create ways where information can flow up. Things are changing so fast today that people in senior management and even middle management can't understand fully what's happening on the shop floor or out in a customer's location, and they're looking to the people that are on the ground to get the information up to them. And then we're seeing that information needs to be moving laterally. And that is a real challenge in organizations. That I was working in a company this week, and the unit that I was working in, was doing some really cool stuff. The challenge was that people literally in the next building had no idea what that particular group was doing. So management is working very, very hard to tear down these walls that exist between organizations so communication can start to flow laterally. Informal communication is something that you as a new supervisor, as a manager, need to be paying very close attention to. This is commonly called the grapevine, and also called gossip, also called a number of other things that I can't say because we're being recorded. But it's that flow of information, some of which is correct and some of which isn't within the organization. From a management perspective, we want to step back and understand that what is going on informally and flowing through this grapevine can give us some pretty good indications of the overall health of the organization. It also allows employees to vet their frustration and also to engage so that they become far more committed to the organization. And we need to be paying attention to it because it indicates where the employees are concerned. When I do coaching with executives, one of the things that we ask them to do is to do a test on how they're being perceived in the organization. So they need to develop a way to gather informal intelligence as to how people see them in a very unfiltered way. And there's some things that can be let go, but if there's issues that may be attacking their integrity or their honesty or their goodwill towards their employees, they have to get on top of that very, very quickly. So what we're trying to do in our organization is figure out a way to coordinate different people in different groups. And your book laid out some very interesting models. One is mutual adjustment. And that model is used when you're seeing teams interacting with other teams where communication is very horizontal within the organization, and you're trying to decide who needs to be working with who to get things done. Very dynamic, very fluid. You see that in the more organic kind of organizations that are responding very fast. Think about an organization like Google. They would use this mutual adjustment form of coordination in trying to get their work done. Direct supervision, again, this is more authority-based, more command and control. What would be worthwhile for you to consider is command and control isn't evil. There are times where it's very appropriate for you as a supervisor or you as a manager to simply tell people this is what you need to do. You could be in a situation where it's urgent, it's critical, somebody could get hurt, a major issue could develop, and that is not a time to bring people around a campfire and have a group hug. Some organizations are working to try to standardize the way that they coordinate the work of people. And again, standardization is not evil. There's parts of jobs that need to be more routine. And you'll see that there's a transition of work in organizations from fairly complex to where the complex is broken down into smaller parts. Those smaller parts become standardized. The standardized work then becomes automated, so organizations are able to use more technologies to get the work done, which frees their workforce to be able to actively engage in issues that are more challenging to them. So let's tie all this together for you, that when you go back and you study your management theory or models and maybe Management 102, and as you go through the business school, the very traditional bureaucratic scientific organizations tend to rely more on a top-down communication model. The human relations models tend to operate in a more friendly, relaxed way, but they still are focused. Understand, management's job is to help people pay attention to what the organization is trying to accomplish. In the human resource structures, communication is set up in a very team-oriented way. Communications go to team members or to team leaders. They then disseminate the information throughout the team. In a systems approach, there's no one set way. That's where the contingency approach towards communication comes in. If you're in that environment, you're going to have to be very sophisticated in your communication skills. And then the transformational model is requiring you as a supervisor, manager, or eventually a senior leader to be able to manage communications up and down the organization. So that's a summary of the key concepts I want you to be able to master. Again, if you're confused, come on into our colloquial sessions that we schedule every week during the semester, and I'll be glad to deal with your concerns.